Hello there, dear friends, and welcome back to the Relaxed Fantasy Review. I have been sick for about a week now, and I'm not feeling too hot, and I haven't had time to write scripts or plan any videos, so I figured why not just turn the camera on and talk a little bit about conditions? It seems appropriate, as I'm feeling under a certain condition myself. Conditions in D&D are effects that can affect either player characters or monsters or enemies of any kind. And there's several of them. They're in the back of the player's handbook in Appendix A. And the details of these conditions are actually something worth talking about. It's a mechanic of the game that we definitely should be discussing because knowing what conditions are the best to inflict upon enemies and which ones to avoid as a player is certainly valuable information. In case you didn't know, Relaxed Fantasy Review does have memberships. For $1 a month, you can support my sick butt by clicking the join button just below this video. It gets you early access to the videos and a little badge next to your name in the comments. If you can join, I would really appreciate it. If you can't, that's all right. I appreciate you being here anyways and supporting my content on YouTube. So, we're just going to go through these in alphabetical order. I don't have a ranking for them today. I'm just reading it straight out of the book. So, first of all, first condition, the blinded condition. Pretty standard stuff. You can't see anything. Blinded creature cannot see, automatically fails any ability check that requires sight. This would be things like perception or insight, investigation, anything that you aren't using your other senses for. And any attack rolls against the creature have advantage, and attack rolls that the creature does has disadvantage. A creature that has something like blind sense or tremor sense would be immune to this kind of thing. This is a pretty potent condition to blind a creature. The idea that you can blind someone and get advantage on all your attacks is really nice. If it happens to you, yeah, you can still technically navigate the battlefield. You don't need to see in order to move around, but just having disadvantage on your attacks is a pretty nasty thing. So if you get blinded, get out of the way. Next up, the charmed condition. Charmed creatures cannot attack the charmer, so whoever has charmed them, or target them with harmful magical effects or anything like that. And the charmer has advantage on their ability checks to interact socially with the creatures, so persuasion, deception, intimidation, maybe even performance. The charm condition's a pretty common one, and a lot of people think it's more powerful than it really is because it usually comes with a rider. A charmed creature technically doesn't have any mechanical reason to do what you say. So charm is not mind control. It just means they see you in an incredibly favorable light and won't attack you. They could still attack your friends, for example. There's a lot of spells like Dominate Person or Dominate Monster that have the charmed condition attached to them, but then there's other stuff that says that they also are mind control. But the charm condition by itself isn't. The Charm Person spell, for example, is not mind control. It just charms them and gives you advantage on your social checks, and they can't attack you. Still a nice thing to put on your enemies, just don't take it too far. Next one is the deafened condition. Deafened creature cannot hear, automatically fails ability checks that require hearing. Not a whole lot to say about this one. You can still fight, you don't have advantage or disadvantage, you just can't hear. So you won't hear things your allies are saying to you. I suppose if your character like canonically can speak sign language or knows some kind of like gesture code, a rogue might through their thieves' cant, for example, then they may still be able to communicate. Telepathy will still work, but talking in the middle of the battle won't really help. And they definitely wouldn't hear someone sneaking up on them as easily. So I'd personally be giving them like disadvantage on perception checks to like spot things, but they can still see just fine. So not super debilitating, that one. Next up, the frightened condition. This is a good one. The frightened creatures have disadvantage on abilities, checks, and attacks while they can see the source of their fear, and they cannot willingly move closer to the source. Having a fear effect is a real good way to lock enemies down, to stop them from getting close to you. If they're melee based enemies, then they can't hurt you. I mean, they might be able to throw something at you, but that's not much. And they'll have disadvantage on that anyway. But having this happen to you as a player can be real bad, and the popular, or at least famous way this can happen is dragons. Adult dragons and up have a frightening presence where they can just make everybody afraid against a saving throw. And then you start off the battle at disadvantage and unable to move closer to the dragon. So yeah, frightened is a real tough condition. A lot of fear effects have a little caveat that says once you've resisted it, you're immune to it. But even then, just a round or two of disadvantage and being unable to move is pretty rough to get out of. So a very powerful effect there. Next, the grapple condition. If a creature gets grappled, their speed drops to 0, and they cannot benefit from bonuses to their speed. This basically means you can't move. If the grappler is incapacitated, or if some other effect takes the grappled creature and the grappler away from each other, such as being pushed away by a spell or being pulled away by some other effect, then the grapple ends. This is all this does. Grappling just says you cannot move. It doesn't mean you can't do other things. A grappled creature can still attack, still use their hands to cast spells. They're not restrained in any way. They just can't move. There is text in the book, it's not actually in the grappled condition, which states that when you're grappling someone, you can drag them with you. So if you, as a player, grapple an enemy, you can drag them up to half of your movement speed, just pulling them with you. This is a good way to move creatures in and out of dangerous areas of effect. But if you get grappled, you can just Misty Step out, or a creature can like yank you out with a gust spell or a telekinetic shove or pull. Anything like that will break a grapple. So great for player characters to use on enemies, not the most dangerous to be used on as a player. Excuse me. Next one, and one of the most difficult ones to work with, the incapacitated condition. Incapacitated creatures cannot take actions or reactions, and this also counts for bonus actions, which it does say in other spots in the book. You cannot do a bonus action if you're incapacitated. You can still move, weirdly enough. This doesn't mean that you're frozen in place. It just means you can't do actions. You can't do stuff. You can run away. If you get incapacitated, you can still move. You can still talk. You just can't take your actions. And that can be real detrimental. You don't want to be in battle and be unable to cast spells or attack or even dodge or disengage or do any of those things. All you can do is run. And you can't take reactions either, so no opportunity attacks, no shield spell if you're a caster, none of that. So, incapacitated, simple condition, very bad. Don't let it happen to you. Then, the only condition on the list that's actually a good condition, the invisible condition. Because being invisible is a condition in this game, and it's actually a good thing to have. You're impossible to see without a special sense or magical senses. For the purposes of hiding, you're heavily obscured. Your location can be traced using noise or tracks on the ground. And attack rolls against you have disadvantage, and your attacks have advantage. Being invisible usually is done using the spell Invisibility, but it can also be greater invisibility, and a couple other effects in the game. It's just the ultimate stealth power. And if you can pull off greater invisibility, it can just be a permanent source of advantage for your attacks in combat. It's very good, and it's just one of those things that's one of the reasons invisibility is one of my favorite spells, because it's really hard to hit someone who's invisible, and unless you start fighting, they may not even know you're there. Next condition is the paralyzed condition. And the paralyzed condition includes the incapacitated condition. It says right there, you can't take actions, bonus actions, or reactions. But you also can't move or speak. You automatically fail saving throws that are strength or dexterity. Attack rolls against you have advantage. And melee attacks within 5 feet of you are automatically critical hits. Paralyzing a creature using something like Hold Monster or Hold Person is a really powerful battlefield tactic because until they break out of it, you just run up and start hitting them, and all your attacks become crits. Being paralyzed as a character, very scary. You don't want that to happen to you. It is one of the most powerful battlefield conditions to inflict on a creature. Next up, you've got the petrified condition, and this one is exactly what it sounds like. It's being turned to stone or some other inanimate substance. The creature is transformed along with any objects that it's carrying that aren't magical. Its weight increases by a factor of 10 and it stops aging. So, yeah, a creature that would normally weigh 200 pounds now weighs an entire ton. The creature is incapacitated, so no actions or reactions, cannot move, speak, and is unaware of its surroundings. So if you're petrified, you can't see or hear anything. Attack rolls against you have advantage, and you fail your strength and dex saves, just like paralyzed, but you are resistant to all damage, and are immune to poison and disease. Although if you have a poison or disease in your system when you're petrified, it isn't removed from you, it's just suppressed. Now, this is an interesting condition because being petrified could be a helpful way to save someone. If they're dying of a deadly poison and you don't have the cure nearby, and resurrecting them isn't an option, petrifying them could actually save their life, assuming you have a way to move them afterwards. Once you've petrified them, you can then take them somewhere else, get them unpetrified, which is a process in and of itself, and then heal the poison as soon as they come back. The same kind of thing applies if you can't resurrect someone, say you're playing the, Tomb of Annihilation and the death curse is a thing. Well, being petrified means that you won't die. Well, you're not likely to die because you have resistance to damage, and who's going to attack a statue? But you could potentially be brought back through greater restoration or something like that. So, not nice for a condition to be used against you, obviously. It's a pretty rough condition to get rid of, but it can actually be a useful tool in the right circumstances. Moving on, you've got the poisoned condition. This simply says you have disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks. Now, you think that doesn't sound that bad, but there are lots of ways to poison a creature. There are spells, there are subclass features, you obviously have the Poisoner's Kit. Poisoning a creature gives it disadvantage on its attacks, which just makes it much less effective in combat. It doesn't do poison damage to them, although a lot of things that poison creatures do poison damage, but as a condition, it's pretty helpful to poison a creature, and if you are poisoned, then you're much less effective, so watch out for poison. Another condition, the prone condition. The prone condition is a condition because it does mean that you aren't in your normal state, but you can just drop prone. Being prone just means you're flat on the ground. When you are prone, the only thing you can do is crawl for movement, which means you move at half speed. You can use half of your speed in order to get up when you are prone. While you're down on the ground, your attacks have disadvantage. And I've always felt this a little weird for ranged characters. I thought laying in the grass and sniping people shouldn't have disadvantage. Maybe with a bow, that wouldn't be easy, but a crossbow, it feels like you should be able to shoot just fine. In any case, your attacks have disadvantage. Attack rolls against you have advantage if a creature's standing next to you, because they can just, hit you on the ground. But ranged attacks against you have disadvantage, interestingly enough. So if someone's shooting you from afar, dropping prone can actually stop them from hitting you as easily. So prone can be handy. knocking a creature prone is one of the easiest ways to generate advantage for melee characters. There's a lot of effects in D&D that can just knock creatures prone, and then everyone with a sword or an axe can just dogpile the creature and do loads of damage. So prone is a very helpful condition to inflict on others. Next, the restrained condition. Restrained is similar to grappled in the sense that your speed drops to 0 and you cannot benefit from any speed bonuses, but it's worse than that. Attacks against you have advantage, your attacks have disadvantage, and you have disadvantage on your dex saves. So being restrained is like grappled, but worse. A lot of effects will do both grapple and restrain. Regular grappling does not do this, but if you can restrain a creature, then yeah, it just does the advantage disadvantage thing, and that's really nice. Next up, the stunned condition, a somewhat rare condition amongst spellcasters. Monks are famous for having their stunning strike. A stunned creature is incapacitated, so no actions or reactions or bonus actions. They cannot move, which is nice, and they can only speak falteringly, so they can't speak properly. The creature automatically fails strength and dex saves, and attacks against them have advantage. So if you can't knock someone prone, you can stun them and have a similar effect, except they can't get back up because they're stunned. Stunned is a really, really nice condition if you want to just really lay into somebody. Finally, the unconscious condition. Unconscious is what happens when you drop to 0 hit points and you're making death saves. You're unconscious. But you can also fall unconscious when you go to sleep, or other effects that can do unconsciousness without dropping you to 0 hit points. You're incapacitated, so no actions, bonus actions, or reactions. You cannot move or speak, and you are unaware of your surroundings. You drop whatever you're holding, so if you're holding weapons and shields, you drop them, and you fall prone immediately. You automatically fail strength and dex saves, attacks against you have advantage, and any attack that's a melee attack within 5 feet is a crit. So being unconscious is obviously the worst condition you can have, other than just being dead. Because you can't do anything, and people can easily hurt you in much more serious ways than before. So yeah, these are the conditions of D&D. There's one other condition which is a little bit different, and it's called the exhaustion condition. Suffering exhaustion is what happens if you don't sleep. And then there are specific other things that can grant you exhaustion. Some spells do it, and there are some DM rulings, like doing a really, really difficult physical task could exhaust you. Berserker Barbarians famously get exhaustion if they use their frenzy power. Exhaustion has levels, though. It's not just one condition. There are 6 levels of exhaustion, and they compound upon each other. So at level 1 exhaustion, for example, you have disadvantage on all ability checks, and you remain this way until you take a long rest. If you get a second level of exhaustion, you keep the disadvantage on ability checks, and your speed gets cut in half. And if you take a long rest, it only removes 1 level, so you'd have to take 2 long rests to get back to 0. A third level of exhaustion has the former 2 and gives you disadvantage on attack rolls and saving throws, so you just have disadvantage on everything now. A fourth level of exhaustion will reduce your hit point maximum in half, so now you have half hit points even if you're fully healed. And if you have a 5th level of exhaustion, your speed just drops straight to 0. This means that now you have disadvantage on everything, can't move, and have half your hit points. So basically you're not doing anything. Like, you can't do anything with 5 levels of exhaustion unless your friends are carrying you around and you're doing everything else at disadvantage. But you can technically get a 6th level of exhaustion, which is instant death. A famous trick a lot of people like to do is there's a spell called Sickening Radiance, which grants levels of exhaustion against Constitution saving throws. The levels disappear when the spell is over, but if you get 6 levels, it just kills you. It doesn't matter what the spell is doing. So a lot of people will like lock creatures in a wall of force or in a trap of some kind, use Sickening Radiance, and it doesn't matter what damages they're resistant to. If they fail Constitution save 6 times, they're just dead instantly. It doesn't matter their health, nothing else. Exhaustion can be a real tough one to work with, but thankfully there's only a few ways to get it. So as a player, it doesn't come up super often unless it's part of like what you're doing. If you're trekking very hazardous terrain, you don't have a lot of sleeping abilities, you can't get long rests. That's how you would stack exhaustion. If that is a thing, you know how dangerous it can be. But thankfully, that's a pretty niche situation. So outside of those niche things, I wouldn't worry about exhaustion too much. In any case, these are the conditions of D&D. Learn them, know them, and understand which ones to watch out for. Some of them, like stunning, paralyzing, they are really, really potent. Other ones, like deafening and grappling, aren't as powerful, but they have their use cases. All in all, knowing your conditions is an important part of playing D&D, so I hope you learned something. This has been the Relaxed Fantasy Review. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe down below. Have a look for the join button down there, and keep your eyes peeled for more videos once I get over this. Have a good one, my friends.